Hey, in today's video, I'm going to talk about the 4 things you must stop doing if you are an overthinker. Number 1, you must stop believing that thinking about your problems is going to fix your overthinking. There is a big difference between problem solving and overthinking. When we're problem solving, it usually doesn't take that long. We think about a problem, we think about a few solutions, we come up with a solution, and then we act on it. But if you're thinking about the same problem over and over and over again for hours, you have to realize you're not in problem solving mode. You're in anxious mode. You're in overthinking mode. And the reality is, when your brain is anxious, no logical or rational answer is going to suffice for your brain. Nothing is going to be good enough. That's why when you go in your head and you try to think about all the ways that you could escape the problem or find a solution to the problem, what does your brain do? It finds another problem to the new solution, and then you have to think of another solution to that new problem. And this goes on and on and on forever. And the reason is because you're anxious and you can't think your way out of an anxious state. But you've convinced yourself that if you just think long and hard enough, you'll find a solution to the problem and then you won't have to be worried about it anymore. That's why you're here, because you've realized that's not how that works. So you have to stop believing that going in your head is going to solve anything. It's only going to make the anxiety worse. Number 2, you have to stop trying to avoid discomfort. The reason why you're in your head so much to begin with is because you're actually uncomfortable in your body and you don't want to feel that. You're going in your head because in a sense it's easier, because you have all this adrenaline pumping through your body, all this anxiety, all this discomfort. Maybe you have a pit in your stomach, a lump in your throat, whatever the case may be. Everyone experiences anxiety differently. But if you're going to your head, that means you actually have physical symptoms. Now, you may not even realize this, or you may realize you have physical symptoms that you just don't want to deal with them. But until you get comfortable with those uncomfortable feelings, you're always going to go in your head and you're always going to continue circling the same loop pattern of trying to think your way out of a problem. What you actually have to do is get comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to learn how to tolerate your stress. When the stress comes in your body, you have to learn to sit with it and be with it. Don't try to escape it. Don't try to find an answer to your problem just yet. Because the reality is, if you're sitting here today watching this video, that means that every stressful event that you've ever encountered, you've made it through. I'm not saying that everything was positive, right? Like certain events can cause major damage in our life. That is true. But most of the events in our life are day-to-day stressors. They're uncomfortable. We get through them and then we move on. So if you're watching this video, that means that you have gotten through every stressor in your life. And so that you have to trust yourself that you don't need to pre-plan everything. You don't need to overthink everything. When the thing happens, whatever the thing is that you're worried about, if it's out of your control, when the thing happens, you'll respond, you'll react appropriately. So when that distress comes, just remind yourself, this is uncomfortable, but I can deal with this. And I know that if something happens in the future that isn't ideal, I'll get through it. Number 3, this is tied into number 2. Stop trying to mitigate disaster. If you're someone who's an overthinker, you're always trying to look ahead and plan ahead and find the problem to mitigate it so that you don't have to deal with the discomfort in your life. So let's say you're someone who thinks about being late a lot. You're very worried about being late. And so what you do is you set 7 alarms. You're running around the house before every event, trying to make sure everything's okay before you go, because you're trying to mitigate a disaster from happening. You don't want to be late. You're afraid to be late. Well, we need to learn it's okay to be late sometimes. Look, I'm not saying you should be someone who's notoriously late to every event, because after a while, people are going to get annoyed at that. But what you're doing now is not working. It's bringing you more and more stress. We need to be okay with the fact that sometimes you're going to be late. Maybe you have to stop setting 7 alarms and set 1 or 2 alarms. And you might have to take a risk. You may wake up a little late and show up a little late one time. Guess what? It's going to suck. People might look at you. Maybe some people will judge you, but you'll get through that event. Stop trying to make sure everything goes perfectly. It will never go perfectly. Because think about it. How many times have you planned for an event and then it ends up going poorly anyway? So now you've stressed about making sure everything's in order and nothing bad happens. So you're stressing about that. Then you get to the event and then something bad happens anyway. And now you're stressed doubly. Or how many times have you planned out an event? You think about it over and over again. You get there and nothing bad happened. And you did all that work for nothing, right? So either way, it's a lose-lose. So you have to get comfortable with letting some disasters happen, because that's life. That's what happens in life. We cannot control everything around. And number 4, you have to stop externalizing your stress. And what do I mean by that? You have to stop putting the onus of the stress on the outside thing. We tend to believe that we are stressed because something out there is causing us stress, when the reality is The reason why we are actually stressed is because of our perception of the problem. And that doesn't mean that you should blame yourself for the problem. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm trying to say is that everybody reacts differently to different situations. Certain situations make some people uncomfortable, other situations make other people uncomfortable. Well, what does that mean? That means that, in a sense, it is all subjective. Yes, there are some things that are objectively stressful, but most of the things that stress us out, they don't necessarily stress everybody out. So we have to realize that our stress is coming from within. It's not coming from out there, which means that there's nothing about out there that we can do to fix our stress. And this is where the overthinking comes in, because we tend to believe, okay, I just need to think about all the problems and all the solutions, and then I'll come up with an answer, and then I won't be as stressed anymore. But the stressor isn't coming from the outside thing. So fixing the outside thing isn't going to fix the internal thing. So this ties into the first one. You have to own your own stress and realize, I am stressed because of the way I am interpreting this, and because I am uncomfortable with the way I feel. But now you can reflect on times in your life where you've had something stressful happen, but you've powered through, and you realize that you're stronger than you think that you are. When we get in our head, we think of ourselves as this flailing, weak person who's just at the whim of everything that happens in the universe. When the reality is, when a stressful thing happens, what do? We adapt. That's what we do. So we need to learn that we have internal power to control how we react and how much external things affect us. And once you do that, now you don't have to think about problems anymore. If you can own the fact that, hey, I'm a strong person who can navigate the world, now I don't have to worry about adjusting or making sure that everything in the world is perfectly the way I want it to be, because it doesn't matter what the world throws at me. I am a rock and I will be okay. I hope you found this helpful. Please let me know in the comments if there's any other things that you have found that has helped your overthinking. And maybe if there's anything that I've said that you don't think will work or you haven't found success in, drop it in the comment below. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.